So let's go ahead and get started. A little bit more about me, and I'll let Matt introduce himself. I've been with RPI maybe, I guess, a year and a half. I've been in the info world, I want to say, since 2015, so about 5 years. Prior to that, I worked in HR at different companies, usually with a focus on technology most of the time. So I've kind of been on both sides. Right now, I work for RPI and I lead HCM projects. So mostly implementations of like GHR, but I've done other modules as well. But as of late, it's been mostly GHR core. When Matt joins, we will give the mic over to him for his introduction, and then there's some content that he prepared. And Sarah, since we don't have Matt, if you want to, feel free to chime in and add, or, if there's something you want to share. I know you've had some great experiences as of late with Infor. Feel free to share and maybe share anything you would like. We can go on to our next slide.
All right, give me just a second. I had to exit out so that I could take myself off of mute in this system. So let's.
Oh. Maybe you just stay. Maybe you just stay unmuted.
So it's a little tricky. Do you want me to start here?
Yeah, and I actually don't hear any background noise from where you are, so
okay.
Feel free just to stay unmuted.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks, Sarah. So in terms of the stage, what we mean by optimization, that's always a buzzword, right? I know certainly I'm mostly an HR technology guy, but I know it's a buzzword in HR technology, probably throughout other ERP areas as well. When we say optimization in the context of today, we're talking about you've been live for a while. Maybe you've been live for a year, maybe 8 months, but you're kind of stable. And you're kind of like, okay, well, what's next? Hey, I'm ready for a new cool project. What can we do? What can we transform? You may have had a few punch list items on your post-go live list that you wanted to work through. So today we're going to talk about some more strategic items that you may want to think about once you have gone live and you're kind of mature, you're kind of in steady state, if you will. Sarah, we're ready. There may be a slight delay in the slides, so if so, we'll try to work through that. Supervisor types and levels. So oftentimes this is something that clients may not deploy at Go Live 1, or if they deploy it, they may not deploy it fully. So when we think about supervisor types and levels, there is a level, and then each level has a corresponding, backwards. Each type has a corresponding level. So as an example, your first level supervisor may be called team lead, and maybe that's a level 1, right? Then your highest level may be called senior executive, maybe that's a level 7. In the middle, you may have associate director or something like that. Maybe that's a level 3. Team, what a lot of people do is they use these levels for like process flows. So as an example, maybe you need to be at a certain level in order to initiate or approve a certain action. Or maybe a certain personnel action needs to go up to a certain level. So let's say you're doing an off-cycle pay change, and there's a new business rule in place that says anytime someone gets a 90% penetration of the zone, so of course for that you would need to have your salary structure set up. Anytime someone penetrates the salary structure to a certain point, maybe it's when they hit it or go over it or get 90% through it, maybe the head of compensation needs to approve that, or maybe the most senior level manager in that org. So the way you can use the most senior level is by looking at your manager types and looking at those levels. It also kind of helps you with your overall hierarchy around processing. So let's say you wanted to process something and you wanted to identify everybody that was a level 4. So if you're a larger organization or a more diverse organization, you can have multiple different sort of business lines in place. So let's say you're an organization and you have home health, but then you also have sort of a proper hospital, right? So within a home health, you may have like some sales managers, right, that help initiate and manage some of the local business. And maybe that sales manager is a level 4. But then what do you call like your corporate managers that work within the healthcare division? Maybe your managers of IT. Maybe those are level 4s or 5s. You can use those levels to sort of take off the name tag and to correspond anyone that is a level 4, whether you're in home health as a level 4 or within sort of the proper hospital system as level 4. We want you all to be able to do this, or we're going to give a special incentive to managers with that. So it really helps you build and manage your hierarchy. Hey, Mr. Slazak, how you doing?
Okay, I'm sorry for the delay there.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah, one of my favorite shows is actually The View. And every day since they've been doing it remotely, they always start off by saying, hey, we're all working from home. Anything could happen. Don't be shocked. That's exactly what I said here. And I told everybody that you kind of had a crash.
Yep. We just we lost our entire network, and it looks like it was not just me though. So I just looked at Down Detector, and there was a little outage in the area. So.
Well, we're gonna rock and roll, and if you just want to do a quick, you actually haven't missed anything aside from the funny joke that I made about Scrabble, and we missed your introduction. So if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, my name is Matthew Slazak. I've been working in GHR exclusively, well, not exclusively, but focused on GHR over the past about 10 years or so. Overall, I've been working in the Lawson space probably around, it's coming up on about 20 years now, so I'm starting to feel older and older as we talk about these, and I keep updating that slide. So yeah, I've been around for a while with it. And so yeah, I mean, as I'm sure Jonathan already mentioned, this is kind of like, Jonathan and I had kind of taken you through, the war room here, the things that we've seen going in, doing optimizations, and just kind of going in and looking at people's systems and seeing some things where we can definitely, kind of proactively fix things rather than always just have to wait for a break fix or, do something where we're waiting for an upgrade or anything like that. So I'm sorry to steal your thunder on that. So I'm good at like just all of a sudden joining in at the last second, I guess. So.
No, I think that's awesome. I think the last point I want to make on hierarchy, that level component, again, you can have a type without a level. The level is an attribute of the type. That level really helps you when you're looking across your organization. I think another good example is, like, you may say that a nursing director is more senior or more junior than a director within the administrative side, like IT. It allows you to compare across a myriad of different functions. So a lot of clients, when they're first going live, they may say, you know what, I don't need that. They may or may not say they want to use supervisor type. That is not a required field. But once you put that level in, you've really maximized your ability to process and report. And, Matt will jump in and share anything that he wants to share as well. As I mentioned, we're going to kind of tag team. So I will now turn it over to Mr. Slazak to talk more about config and personalizations.
Sure. Yeah. So another place where we've seen a lot of people be able to make some headway on this is start to look at more of the things that already exist within your system and look at what are your super users doing. The people who are really the workhorses and are doing a lot of stuff, on a daily basis. Are they going around digging into different areas, trying to find certain pieces of data or kicking off certain action requests or doing, just a variety of things that are not necessarily fully aligned for them? They've got to find data. So think about doing some sort of configuration or personalization just for them. Configurations, for the most part, again, remember they're global, so they're always out there for everybody. So if you've got a very small subset of people, your super users who are always looking for those pieces of information, you can always give them a personalization. If you're not comfortable, or if your IT department doesn't necessarily want to roll out personalizations to everybody, which is totally valid, you can go in and create a personalization for one person, make sure that it passes muster, make sure there's no security holes or anything like that. And you can just go through and actually copy that personalization onto somebody else, even if they don't have personalization access to do it themselves. There's kind of a trick around the system to go into the user business classes and kind of copy that LPL and paste it in for somebody else. So that's a possibility for you. Also think about it with the perspective of like, you know, those list views, those work lists. If they're always grabbing a bunch of information and exporting it to a CSV, hopefully they don't have to do that. But let's face it, sometimes we have to, you know. So think about those lists and the things that they would need. Create that as a report for them. Just as a quick report, they can grab that information. If it's something they have to run, you know, 5 times a year, and they're compiling all this data all the time, create that report one time for them. They can bring it up ad hoc whenever they need to. Also think about the security roles that people have. If they've got a situation where they have to go in and try to find an extra piece of information, maybe they don't have regular security to do so. Think about something like a social security number or an address. Maybe they need to go in and find that somewhere. I've seen one client where they had this one report that they built in GHR, was really nice, but they needed to get a social number on there. So they literally were exporting the list from GHR, then running a query in from the S3, from their on-prem S3 system through ODBC, grabbing all the social numbers and then merging them together. So there's a lot of problems with that. First of all, the big security hole that's out there. And not to mention, you've got all this information that you're taking into an Excel spreadsheet. Anybody can grab that and do anything with it with no security. So, you know, there can be something as simple as just tweak the security role for that user to allow them to see that extra field so they don't have to go elsewhere to do it. So really, when you get down to it, we want to take all this information, anything that's got to get done, the work that's got to get done, let it be performed by the people who need to do it and where they need to do it. There's no reason to give them extra access in a third-party system or through a separate reporting tool when you can just tweak something, give them a personalization, and go in and do what they need to. So, okay, we can go forward.
I think Mr. Getty wants to know something about your office.
Oh, well, I will be happy to share. This actually was a headdress that my father made by hand.
Oh, wow.
He was a big fan of Native American culture, and he lovingly created it, and it actually has been inducted as an honorary artifact into the Iroquois Nation.
Oh, wow. Great question, Bill. Thank you for asking.
Mm-hmm.
From Macon, Georgia. All right, so Matt, I think this is your topic too.
Okay, sure. So other actions and interfaces. This is something we've seen a lot. Infor has gone through and done a lot lately where we now have additional interfaces. There used to just basically be that one, like the one broad-based, I should say. It's like 4 or 5 different interfaces that they had running from GHR to S3. But what we were seeing with a lot of people was they built interfaces from their S3 system over to, say, their badging system or a security system or something as simple as a point of sale system for their cafeteria for somebody to just swipe their badge and be able to pay for their lunch that way. But they were doing that as a separate interface that was written from S3 to get that information over to that other system. So we've got the tools now to go in and take an existing interface and modify it if you needed to. For example, if you're not using like Infor's LMS, maybe you could co-opt that interface and send it over to that point of sale system directly. Or another thing that you can do is just write an interface directly to produce a flat file that that other system can take. There's no reason for S3 to be the intermediary anymore. Obviously, the advantages of GHR is that it's a real-time system. You're always going to see something as of midnight, if you're using those effective dated actions, that's real information. But we know that S3 doesn't have to play by those rules. For payroll processing, for example, we might want to hold on to those transactions. So you have a situation where you have asynchronous data. GHR is up to date right now. S3 still has that while we're still processing payroll. But why don't we grab that information directly from GHR and send it over to that other system? There's always a way for us to do extra interfaces like that. Write an IPA flow and get that information where it needs to go. Another piece of that, and we see this all the time, I'm sure, Jonathan, you've seen this in more than one implementation, GHR comes with a set of delivered actions, which is all well and good and everything. But let's just say that I want to go in and change somebody's relationship to organization, but I also have to do something with the work assignment to change the FTE on that. Right now, the way you normally have to do it is do something like two separate transactions, one on the change relationship to org, one on the work assignment. Maybe you could be savvy and try to co-opt a transfer action or something like that, trying to get that information in. But there's no reason why you couldn't even extend one of those actions that's already out there that will cross over two different business classes, allow you to have one single transaction that will serve both of those business classes without having to do a couple different steps. There are ways now in Configuration Console and IPA to really allow you to do that. Route it where it needs to go, get the information where it needs to go.
Thanks, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is sort of a loaded topic. So I would say even prior to my N4 days, the overall, when I used to work in HR, managing jobs and positions and their descriptions has always been sort of a hot topic. Most people are never 100% happy with where they are. It's always a lot. So one thing that clients often may do, again, we're at a point now in our journey for this session that we're live, and we've been live for a while, and we're kind of like, okay, we're steady. We have our core personnel actions processing, users are adopting, so what's next? So one thing could be the standardization of jobs. So I'll go back to like my healthcare example, especially, a lot of our clients have grown through acquisition. So you may have one entity that has their own jobs for their nurses, and then you may have another entity that has their own jobs, and the nursing job by definition is the same, but really in GHR it's two different jobs, maybe because one entity requires something that another one doesn't, or maybe they're actually the same, but no one had the time to actually merge them, because that's a lot easier said than done, right? Standardizing those jobs and making sure across the system that if the true job is the same, the day-to-day function of the resource, that everyone is sharing and standardizing those. Another piece of functionality that I know a lot of my clients had not chosen to do for Go Live 1 is what we call request new job and request new position. So I always use my clown example. So let's say the chief nursing officer says, hey, I really want to kind of brighten up my patient experience. I want to hire a director of clowns. And that role is going to report to me, and I want a clown director. That CNO could then go in the system. There's a delivered process out of the box where they can fill out a form and request a new job. And that approval flow can go to wherever we want. If it needs to go to their HR partner, followed by comp, followed by their manager, or whatever logic we want to build in. The same thing for that position. Maybe once that job is made, maybe each of the main hospitals will have a director of clown. And so maybe those, maybe those CNOs or maybe those nurse leaders of those areas, or maybe the COO, right? Maybe that's more, or the CEO maybe, depending upon the structure, maybe they can hire in those positions. And the last one is called request position update, where you can say, okay, I own position, director of clowns for ABC Healthcare. However, I want to make some changes to that position. I don't want to have to call my HR partner or email HRIS. I really like that spirit of self-service. I'm just going to go in, I'm going to request some changes. All of that team can flow through GHR. It does have delivered process flows, but as many of us know, you can change those to tailor to your organization. Matt, I don't know if have you actually had a lot of clients use any of those request jobs?
Yeah, it's been something that I've only seen maybe one, maybe two clients who did that. Like I said, day one, they wanted that functionality. But a lot of people are going back through now and, putting those back in, which is definitely, the way we want to see them go. Something that's actually helping us out with this now is if you haven't explored pieces of GHR lately, there now is this span of control functionality, which is, I want to say it's probably within the past year or so. I can't remember exactly when.
It's very new.
Yeah. The nice thing about that is, there was always a problem where if I went in as a manager, I could go in and click on requesting a new position, which is great. But at the same time, I'm working in housekeeping. I should not be able to request a nursing position. I should not be able to request a new police officer or anything like that. It really has nothing to do with my job. So this new the functionality for span of control starts to limit that a little bit and say, okay, is this something that actually, does this position report to me? Should I be able to see it? Is it in my organization unit? So it's starting to get a little bit of the guardrails on that to really prevent, people from requesting things that they really shouldn't be doing. Same thing with what you're saying, with the requesting the updates. I've seen a lot of people, or the people who have implemented it, they've all gone in and modified that flow, like you said. Like if we want to say, we're going to request a new position, that's great. If I want to request this update, that's wonderful. But maybe I have some open job requisitions on that. So maybe I have to add a node into my process flow when somebody is requesting that position update. Maybe it should go out and see if there's any open recs on that. And if I did change that position and it's accepted, maybe it should burst out an email then to the recruiter to say, hey, wait a second, just so you know, this position has changed. So, there's a lot of that where we can do those little tweaks in there, but definitely these are great functionalities to use.
Thank you for that, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, async. So this is one of our favorite things to look at. If you're ever noticing things are not flowing through your system, the first thing that you should always be doing is looking at your async. Look at your async administrator. You're going to see if there's anything that failed inside there. Chances are you're going to be looking at your default queue for async and just see if something has failed. A lot of times you'll see things that kind of run into each other. I've heard people call it like the Three Stooges syndrome, where everybody's trying to run through the door at the same time. And you're going to have a problem like that in async sometimes. If multiple people are kicking off the same rebuild jobs at the same time, you're going to see some actions failing inside there. If I do a lot of position changes or supervisor changes and it's trying to rebuild the org structure 5 times at the same time, you might have some async values. So look for that. Look for anything that's failing out there. You might also see something if you're looking at your audit log. Let's just say that I put in a promotion for Jonathan for next week. Next week happens, but he's still in his old position. And if I go and look at the audit log on that, I might see a green audit log line. And this is like, there used to be a huge problem with this. The green audit log line, there used to be an Infor help desk ticket or knowledge base articles just on the audit log line. Chances are you had something fail in your effective data queue. but you're only going to really see these things if you're looking at your async records. Always go in and check those async records out. You're going to see things like hung records. You're going to see these things that are just failing. You want to check them out. I want to say every time we've gone in to do an implementation or an optimization, we look at the async log, and they might have, I think I might have seen, I think my record was somewhere around like 18,000 async failures. So you want to monitor it. You don't have to necessarily do it every day, but you are going to want to look for that.
So Matt, Amy would like to know if we could just, she's saying, where do we look at the async?
Yep. So what you're going to do, you need to have administrator access, and you're going to go in, you'll see Async Administrator. And if you look at the Async Overview portion of that, you should be able to go in and see all of your queues inside there. Speaking of the queues, yes, you do have to do that in Rich Client. I think they've done some of it in the Web UI in the recent version. So you should be able to see that. LMGHR is usually where you're going to be doing it. I can't really speak to the LS apps on that. Speaking of queue management, where I was talking about, those multiple records running at the same time, that's where you can start to do some more things with queue management now. If we know that we're doing something like rebuild jobs frequently, you can increase the number of records that can happen simultaneously. How many times the server can be hit at the same time with those records. If you're running into multiple things or multiple threads hitting at the same time, you might actually decrease that. The downside of that is if you have everything going into your default queue, you might slow down other processing. But we can now go in and create new queues. So if you're always running a certain rebuild job, you can go in and say, okay, specify it in how you're setting it up to always use a specific queue, which will not have that multi-threaded problem. There's also some nice functionality that they've rolled out within the past 6 months or so. I think it was November or December, where if you're running a lot of data imports, you can actually suspend some of those queues from even, like, as you know right now, if you load in a record, it's going to go and try to rebuild all those keywords, for example, for a work assignment. You can actually suspend those and just run that once at the end instead of kicking off. We see this all the time during implementations. You'll literally have hundreds of thousands of rebuild jobs that are queued up just because we're loading data in. Now you can actually suspend those queues and just process that once at the end. Okay. Effective data group. Jonathan, have you seen a lot of people using effective data or future data transactions?
Not too heavily, Matt.
Okay. That is one of my favorite tricks in GHR. Again, when we first go to GHR, we're very used to the S3 mentality of we can't process this transaction to change this person's pay rate because we still have to cut a check. So we might hold on to all of that. Again, GHR is a real-time system. We can allow it to do the things that are supposed to happen. And what ends up happening is you can start to use effective dates to their fullest potential. If I know that we're promoting Jonathan next week, I can put that transaction in right now and allow that to hit. As soon as that effective date hits at 12 o'clock in the morning, Jonathan is going to be promoted into that new position. And if you time everything out the right way, let's just say that we're feeding all this information over to Kronos, for example, to actually, get his time records in there the right way. If we allow that effective data transaction to happen next week, and we're running the Kronos interface after that processes, when Jonathan comes into work next Tuesday, he's actually going to be able to punch in using his new pay rate and using his new position and see all of that in the interfaces or in the systems, whatever we are interfacing things out to. So we really do recommend going through and looking at those effective dates and make sure that you're doing it the right way. make sure you're getting those future data transactions out there. Now, the downside of it is you do have to be careful with it, because we have gone into many clients and looked at the effective dated queue, and they're saying, well, some of these transactions just never seem to happen. If you look at your effective dated queue, you might have had somebody who just is, very quickly typing things in. I used to run payroll a long time ago, and the number of times you transpose something because you're just typing as fast as you possibly can, it's kind of ridiculous, but it does happen. And so you want to look for anything that has a super future effective date. So the number of times we've seen people who put in a transaction and it's effective 2091 instead of 2019, it happens more often than we think. So you do want to look at that effective dated queue and see if there's anything hanging out there like that. You do have the ability to change those effective dates, and we've got webinars and information on that as well. Webinars about changing those effective dates and history corrections. So check those out as well. But it's a nice place for us to be able to look and optimize the system.
So Teresa wants to know, is there a way to order the job for the same employee to help decrease errors like we used to do in S3?
To order the job, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Are you saying just if they have multiple transactions on the same day?
Yeah, I think maybe Teresa will, yes, is what she's saying.
All right, so what normally happens is there is some queuing that's going to take place. It normally will do a sequence number. There's a transaction ID number that is attached to any transaction, and it usually runs in order of that. If you're not seeing it function that way, it could be a situation where maybe there are just they're going against different queues or different business classes. You'd have to look at that a little bit deeper, but there's no way that I know of automatically to just say, always do this one, then this one, then this one, outside of using a different date. It's usually pretty good with that, though.